let's talk about this Seattle locker room. It's worse than you know, huh? Give us the broad strokes of what you learned this week.
Well, the main thing, Rich, is just how that locker room seems to just be fine with all this stuff. They just sort of, it's how they roll. It's a lot of, as you know those guys. It's a lot of strong personalities, and they seem to. I got some pushback on if they thrive on it. It's not that they thrive on it. It's just that it's like baked into what they do. So it's just sort of, there's divisions and there's some bitterness with some guys, but most of the guys there just sort of accept it and they have their arguments and they move on. And the it's worse than you know part was more. There's more arguments than you know about, more division than you know about.
Well, between who? Between who? Offense and defense?
Offense and defense. Offense and defense. And the main thing was that the story by Seth was accurate, was pretty dead on. There was just disagreement about how much it matters. And that's where I think a lot of this goes and where it's been and where it's going to go next. How much does all this division between offense and defense matter? And Seth's story was really good and really dead on, but a lot of players will say, yeah, okay, yeah, all right, that's so what? We just go on, we play. We don't. Some of us don't like each other. Some of us are still mad about what happened. Some of us don't like the play calling in the Super Bowl, the last play. Some more than others. But most of us just sort of go on and just this is how it is.
And that's what I said in the segment before, and I say all the time, and covering the NFL as long as you do, is that this is good stuff to talk about in June, May, April, when there's no games of which to speak. And the idea is, like, what does it matter? How will it manifest itself in wins and losses? And in that regard, I remember on Thursday Night Football, and this was brought up in the Seth Wickersham article that ESPN, the magazine, published that you're referring to, on that Week 15 game. We're there, and the Rams had just fired Jeff Fisher, and there's John Fossil coaching the Rams in an interim style, and the Seahawks are having, their usual somewhat plotting manner in which they're trying to beat the Rams. And then Russell Wilson almost gets picked off on the 1-yard line, and Richard Sherman brought it all back up again. And we looked at each other, Irvin and me and Marshall, and we're like, this is still there. This is still there. And that is how it manifests itself. Here we are in a playoff drive in December. Maybe, just maybe, this is the sort of stuff that lingers and does prevent some cohesion. Mike, is that true?
Yeah. I think there's some of that. The quote that sort of stood out to me in talking to some of these guys was how one guy said it's like being in a workplace where one department has constant friction with another, but they put out the best laptops in the world. And that's sort of how it does. What you just described is true. I mean, it can have an effect, but they still manage to put out this great product. I guess the ultimate question is how much effect does this stuff have? Does it actually translate on the field? You just gave a great example of how it can. And I think, when you read Seth's article and some of the reporting I've done recently and in the past, a lot of the bitterness is, it is centered on Richard. They will deny this publicly vehemently. But when you talk to players privately, I got texts from guys saying, yeah, it's what I wrote was true, or Seth wrote was true. They will accept it privately that Richard is really particularly angry about that play and some of the things with Russell Wilson, and so there's stuff there, and it can manifest itself. But I think the question is how much. What does it do? This is one of the most intellectual, really highly intelligent locker rooms I've ever been around. You've been around a lot of locker rooms yourself and seen a lot of things and seen a lot of players and you know how some guys get it, some guys don't, and some guys are really smart and sharp and just understand. This Seattle locker room is like they are a bunch of smart dudes, not just on the field but off the field, and they're strong-willed. So all these things come into this volatile mix that can just sort of boil over.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on radio stations across the country and audience.
If you liked some of that, get some more of that on the Rich Eisen Show app. Follow all the information you see right here on the Rich Eisen Show.